The day my parents died, my Uncle Marcus showed his true colors. I was 17, still numb from the car accident that had taken both my mother and father, when he called a family meeting at the sprawling estate that had been my home for as long as I could remember. "Oliver," he said, his voice carrying that false sympathy I'd come to know well. "We need to discuss your future." I sat in my father's study, surrounded by the antique furniture and leather-bound books that had always given me comfort. My uncle sat behind the massive oak desk, my father's desk, as if he already owned it. In a way, he did. As the new CEO of Harrison Industries, he'd inherited not just the company, but control over the family trust until I turned 25. "Your father," he continued, adjusting his gold cufflinks, while brilliant in business, was unfortunately lax in his estate planning. The company bylaws clearly state that only a qualified heir can inherit controlling interest. I knew where this was going. My uncle had always resented that my father, his younger brother, had inherited control of the family company. Now he had his chance to rewrite history. "Qualified?" I asked, fighting to keep my voice steady. "I'm studying business and engineering at a state school," he cut in with a dismissive wave. "Hardly the pedigree Harrison Industries requires. Your cousin William is at Harvard Business School. He understands how to run a real company." William. My cousin who'd never worked a day in his life, who'd failed upward through private schools on our family name alone. The same cousin who'd spent his summers partying while I interned in every department of Harrison Industries, learning the business from the ground up. "This was my father's company," I said quietly. "He was grooming me to what?" Uncle Marcus laughed. "To run it into the ground with your ridiculous ideas about sustainable manufacturing, about employee profit sharing. The board would never accept it." He stood up, straightening his custom suit. "Here's what's going to happen. You'll be provided a modest allowance for college. Once you graduate, you'll need to find your own way. The estate will be sold, and the proceeds will go to the company's expansion fund." My chest tightened. "You're selling my home." "It's company property," he said coldly. "You have until the end of the week to pack your things and move to the dormitory. I've already arranged it with your school." I stared at him, this man who'd smiled at family dinners, who'd patted my head at Christmas parties, who pretended to care about me right up until the moment he could throw me away. "You can't do this," I protested. The trust is under my control until you're 25. He reminded me. "And given your lack of qualifications, the board has already voted to transfer all assets to the company's holdings. It's done, Oliver. Accept it." I stood up slowly, anger burning through my grief. "My father built this company from nothing. He trusted you. Your father was a sentimental fool who let his emotions cloud his judgment." Uncle Marcus's face hardened. "Just like you're doing now. Face reality, Oliver. You're nobody. You'll never be successful in this business. The sooner you accept that, the easier your life will be." That night, I packed what I could into my old Volvo. Clothes, books, my laptop, and most importantly, the external hard drive where I'd stored copies of all my father's research and development files. Uncle Marcus might control the company, but he didn't know about my father's secret projects, the innovations we discussed late into the night. As I drove away from the only home I'd ever known, my uncle's words echoed in my head. "You're nobody." I gripped the steering wheel tighter, making a silent vow. I would prove him wrong, no matter how long it took. The next few years were a blur of endless work and relentless determination. I maintained a full course load while working 2 jobs, one at a local engineering firm, the other doing freelance coding late into the night. Every spare moment was spent developing my father's unfinished ideas. My father had been working on revolutionary manufacturing automation software, something that could transform industrial production while actually creating jobs instead of eliminating them. The project was only half finished when he died, but I had all his notes, all his code, all his dreams. I lived on raiment and coffee, saved every penny, and graduated with dual degrees in business and engineering. While William partied through Harvard on my uncle's dime, I was building something real. The day after graduation, I took my savings, barely $50,000, and started Phoenix Dynamics. The name was a deliberate choice. Like the mythical bird, I would rise from the ashes of what my uncle had destroyed. The first 2 years were brutal. I worked out of my cramped studio apartment, sleeping on a mattress on the floor, using my car as a mobile office for client meetings. Most nights, I coded until my vision blurred, refining my father's automation software into something revolutionary. Then came the breakthrough. A small manufacturing company agreed to beta test my system. Within months, their productivity increased by 40% while their workforce grew by 25%. Word spread through the industry. Suddenly, Phoenix Dynamics wasn't just another startup. We were the future of manufacturing automation. Venture capital firms came calling. I chose my investors carefully, maintaining controlling interest while expanding rapidly. 5 years after starting Phoenix Dynamics, we were valued at $100 million. 3 years after that, we hit $500 million. I moved the company into a sleek office tower downtown, hired the best engineers I could find, and continued refining our technology. Every success was a step toward my ultimate goal, taking back what my uncle had stolen. I kept tabs on Harrison Industries through industry channels. Under my uncle's leadership, the company had grown aggressively, but at a cost. They cut corners on research and development, squeezed suppliers, and treated employees like disposable resources. The stock price looked good, but the foundation was crumbling. William, now a vice president thanks to shameless nepotism, appeared regularly in business magazines, bragging about his innovative leadership. None of the articles mentioned how he crashed 3 company cars or how his failed projects had cost millions. I bided my time, building my own empire in the shadows. Phoenix Dynamics expanded into new markets, acquired strategic competitors, and developed technology that made Harrison Industries systems look obsolete. Uncle Marcus never connected Phoenix Dynamics with a nephew he'd thrown away. The company was privately held, and I stayed out of the press, letting our technology speak for itself. As far as he knew, Oliver Harrison had disappeared into obscurity. Then the recession hit. Harrison Industries, overleveraged and underprepared, began to falter. Their stock price plummeted. Suppliers, tired of late payments and broken promises, started jumping ship. Banks called in loans that the company couldn't pay. One morning, my assistant placed a file on my desk. Harrison Industries was on the verge of bankruptcy. They needed a miracle, or they'd be forced to sell for pennies on the dollar. I picked up my phone and called our acquisition team. Remember that contingency plan we discussed? It's time. 3 days later, I sat in my office reviewing the preliminary takeover paperwork when my assistant buzzed me. "Sir, Marcus Harrison is here for the meeting. He's asking to speak with Phoenix Dynamics CEO." I smiled, straightening my tie. After 12 years, it was time for my uncle to meet the nobody he'd once despised. Uncle Marcus strode into my office like he owned it, the same way he'd taken over my father's study 12 years ago. But time hadn't been kind to him. His hair had gone completely gray, deep lines etched around his mouth. His designer suit couldn't hide how the stress had aged him. He stopped dead when he saw me sitting behind the desk. The color drained from his face as recognition dawned. "Oliver?" "Hello, Uncle Marcus," I said calmly. "Please have a seat. We have a lot to discuss." He stood frozen, his carefully prepared pitch forgotten. You're Phoenix Dynamics." Surprised? I gestured to the chair across from my desk. "I imagine you expected some Silicon Valley wonderkind, not the nobody you kicked out of his own home." He sank into the chair, his arrogance crumbling. "How and did you build $1 billion company?" I finished for him. "It started the night you threw me out. Everything I've done since then has been leading to this moment." I opened a folder on my desk, displaying Harrison Industries' financial statements. "Your company is 3 weeks away from bankruptcy. Your stock has lost 80% of its value. Your major creditors are calling in their loans. You need an immediate capital injection of at least $200 million just to keep the doors open." His face hardened. "If you think this is some kind of revenge." "Revenge?" I laughed coldly. "No, Uncle Marcus, this is business. Something you taught me all about when you stole my inheritance." I stood up, walking to the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the city. "Phoenix Dynamics is prepared to acquire Harrison Industries. We'll assume all debt, protect the remaining jobs, and implement our superior technology across all operations." "You want to take my company?" His voice shook with rage. "Your company?" I turned back to him. "You mean my father's company? The one you stole from his 17-year-old son the day he died." "I protected that company," he snapped. "You were just a boy with ridiculous ideas about About sustainable manufacturing, employee profit sharing. The same innovations that made Phoenix Dynamics an industry leader? I cut him off. How's that old school management style working out for you now, Uncle? He slumped in his chair, the fight draining from him. The board won't approve this. The board approved it last night, I said quietly. They know Phoenix Dynamics is their only hope for survival. Sign the papers and we'll retain 60% of your current workforce. Refuse and we'll wait for the bankruptcy auction. Your choice. You've been planning this all along, he whispered. All these years. I learned from the best, I replied coldly. You taught me exactly how ruthless business can be. A knock at the door interrupted us. William burst in, his face red with anger. Father, you can't be serious about selling tow. He stopped short when he saw me. Oliver? What the hell are you doing here? Hello, cousin. Congratulations on that promotion to VP. How many company cars have you crashed this year? William's face flushed darker. You little. William, Uncle Marcus cut him off sharply. Sit down and shut up. I watched with satisfaction as my cousin, once so proud of his Harvard MBA, slumped into a chair like a scolded child. Here's what's going to happen, I said, pulling out the acquisition paperwork. Harrison Industries will become a wholly owned subsidiary of Phoenix Dynamics. We'll retain key engineering staff and implement our automation systems across all facilities. And what about us? William demanded. I smiled. You'll be offered the same opportunity I had 12 years ago, the chance to find your own way. Though I doubt Harvard prepared you for actual work. Uncle Marcus stared at the papers, his hands trembling slightly. You're destroying my family's legacy. No, I corrected him. I'm restoring my father's legacy, the legacy you tried to erase. I slid the contracts across the desk. Sign or I'll wait for the bankruptcy filing. Either way, Harrison Industries will be mine by the end of the month. For a long moment, the only sound was the ticking of the antique clock on my wall. The same clock that once sat in my father's study. Finally, Uncle Marcus picked up the pen. Your father, he said quietly, would be proud of you. Don't, I cut him off. You lost the right to talk about my father the day you betrayed his trust. One by one, he signed the papers that transferred control of Harrison Industries to Phoenix Dynamics. Each signature was like watching him age another year, the weight of his choices finally catching up to him. William stormed out before the signing was complete, no doubt heading to his lawyer's office. It wouldn't matter. The contracts were ironclad. What happens now? Uncle Marcus asked, setting down the pen. Now I'm going to turn Harrison Industries into what it always should have been. A company that values innovation over tradition, merit over bloodline, and people over profits. He stood slowly, straightening his shoulders with what dignity he had left. And us? What happens to the family? Family? I laughed softly. You stopped being family the moment you chose greed over your brother's dying wishes. We're just two businessmen concluding a transaction. After they left, I sat alone in my office, holding my father's old pocket watch. The only personal item I'd managed to save from the estate. The inscription inside read, "To my son, who will build something greater than I ever dreamed." I did it, Dad, I whispered. I took it back. The next morning, I walked into Harrison Industries headquarters as its new CEO. The security guard who'd once watched me pack my things nodded respectfully as I passed. The elevator carried me to the top floor, but this time I wasn't a grieving teenager. I was the most powerful person in the building. I stepped into my father's old office, now mine again. The family photos my uncle had removed were replaced with awards and accolades, not for Harrison Industries, but for Phoenix Dynamics. Signs of the empire I built from nothing. Within 6 months, Harrison Industries was transformed. Our automation software revolutionized their manufacturing processes. Employee satisfaction soared. The stock price tripled. Uncle Marcus occasionally sent messages through his lawyers, trying to negotiate a better position. I never responded. William, last I heard, was consulting for small businesses, though his Harvard MBA carried less weight now that the truth about his failures had become public. I kept my father's study exactly as it had been, down to the leather-bound books and antique furniture. But on the wall behind the desk, I hung a new photo, not of family portraits or corporate awards, but of a beat-up Volvo packed with everything I owned, parked outside my first apartment, a reminder of where this journey began. Success? I'd learned wasn't about proving others wrong. It was about proving yourself right. My uncle had tried to erase me from the family legacy. But instead, he forced me to build something far greater than he could have imagined. Today, Phoenix Dynamics leads the industry in sustainable manufacturing technology. Harrison Industries, now our most successful subsidiary, has become a model of corporate responsibility. The employees who once feared my uncle's ruthless policies now have profit sharing, career development, and a real stake in the company's success. And that 17-year-old boy my uncle called a nobody, he built an empire bigger than Harrison Industries ever was, not out of revenge, but because he believed in something better. Sometimes I sit in my father's old office late at night, remembering the day everything changed. The photo of the Volvo reminds me that success isn't about what you start with. It's about what you build when everyone else says you can't. Uncle Marcus taught me that business was ruthless. But my father taught me that it could also be visionary. In the end, I proved them both right. And that's a legacy worth building. I stood in my small antique shop, carefully polishing a Victorian-era silver tea set. Through the window, I could see the expensive cars rolling up to Morton's Steakhouse across the street, sleek BMWs and Mercedes that probably cost more than my entire inventory. My brother Marcus would be in one of those cars, arriving for our monthly family dinner in his usual style. The silver tea set gleamed under the soft lights, its intricate engravings telling stories of a bygone era. Most people would see it as just another old piece of kitchenware, worth maybe a few $100s. But I knew better. This particular set had once belonged to a British duchess, and its true value was closer to $50,000. That was my secret, knowing the true value of things, and more importantly, knowing when to keep that knowledge to myself. I'm Emily Harrison, though in certain exclusive circles, I'm known as E. Cross, one of the most influential private collectors and antiquities dealers in the country. But to my family, I'm just their disappointing youngest daughter who runs a quaint little junk shop in downtown Boston. The bell above the door chimed as my assistant Kate walked in. "The Henderson estate papers just came through," she said, holding up a thick envelope. "You were right about the provenance." I smiled, thinking of the collection I'd acquired last week for a fraction of its true worth. And the transfer. Complete. The shell company now owns 51% of Harrison Global's shares. Your brother has no idea. I nodded, checking my watch. Time to close up and head to dinner. Make sure everything's ready for tomorrow's board meeting. I want all the documentation in order when Marcus realizes who really owns his company. As I locked up the shop, I thought about how it all started. 10 years ago, I was fresh out of college with an art history degree and a passion for antiques. My family had other plans. Marcus, the golden child with his MBA, was taking over the family company. My parents wanted me to join him there, working under his supervision in some meaningless administrative role. Instead, I used my small inheritance from Grandma, a mere $100,000 compared to the millions Marcus received, to open my antique shop. My family was horrified. "A shop?" my mother had exclaimed. "Like a common retailer?" But Grandma had known what she was doing. She taught me everything about antiques, about recognizing value where others saw only age. More importantly, she taught me about patience. The best revenge, she used to say, is the one no one sees coming. Now walking into Morton's in my simple dress, vintage Chanel, though my family would never recognize that, I prepared myself for another evening of thinly veiled condescension. They were already seated at our usual table, Marcus in his custom suit, his wife Diana dripping in new money jewelry, my parents beaming with pride at their successful son. My sister-in-law's latest diamond bracelet probably cost more than what they thought I made in a year. "Emily, darling," my mother air-kissed my cheek. "We were just discussing Marcus's latest acquisition. Harrison Global is expanding again." I slid into my seat, accepting the house wine while they all had expensive champagne. "Oh, do tell." Marcus puffed up like a peacock. "We're acquiring Sterling Industries. It's a huge deal, will put us in the Fortune 500. Of course, he smirked in my direction. "I wouldn't expect you to understand the complexities of corporate mergers. How's the little shop doing?" If he only knew that I'd been orchestrating his company's moves for months through a complex web of shell companies and private equity firms. That Sterling Industries acquisition, I'd arranged it knowing it would stretch Harrison Global's resources to the breaking point. Oh, I shrugged, still selling old things to people who appreciate them. Deanna laughed, the sound like tinkling glass. It must be so quaint. I passed by your shop the other day. It looked rather empty. Of course it looked empty. My real inventory, worth millions, was stored in a secure warehouse outside the city. The shop was just a front, a careful cultivation of the image my family had of me. Business is steady, I said mildly, taking a sip of wine. Steady? Marcus scoffed. Emily, you need to think bigger. In fact, he leaned forward, adopting what I called his businessman voice. I've been thinking. The building your shop is in, it's in a prime location. Harrison Global could use it for our new downtown office. Really? I kept my voice neutral, even as I suppressed a smile. The building he was talking about, I owned it, along with half the block. I could make you a generous offer, he continued. Way more than you're making now. Maybe even find you a position at the company. Something appropriate to your skills. Our father nodded approvingly. That's very generous of you, Marcus. Emily. You should consider it. It's time you started thinking about your future. If they only knew that my future included owning controlling interest in Harrison Global through a series of careful acquisitions. Tomorrow's board meeting would reveal that E. Cross, the mysterious collector they'd been competing with for various properties, was now their majority shareholder. I'll think about it, I said, knowing how much that non-commitment would irritate Marcus. He was used to people jumping at his offers. Still playing with your little treasures, he sighed. Sometimes I wonder what Grandma was thinking, leaving you that money. She must have known you'd waste it on this hobby. I thought about the empire I'd built from that waste, the international network of collectors, the private auctions, the multimillion-dollar deals conducted in whispers and sealed with handshakes, all while maintaining the appearance of a simple antique shop owner. Grandma understood more than you think, I replied quietly. Please. Marcus waved his hand dismissively. She was sentimental. But this is business, Emily. Real business. Speaking of which, he turned to our parents. Wait until you hear about tomorrow's board meeting. We're announcing the Sterling acquisition, and there's this mysterious major shareholder who's been buying up stock. I listened as he bragged about his plans, about how he convinced this unknown investor to support his vision for the company. He had no idea that I'd spent years positioning myself for this moment, using my knowledge of antiques and art to build a fortune that dwarfed Harrison Global's holdings. The rest of dinner passed in its usual way, Marcus dominating the conversation with tales of his business prowess, Diana showing off her latest luxury purchases, our parents hanging on their every word while occasionally shooting me concerned looks. As we were finishing dessert, Marcus couldn't resist one final dig. Emily, it's not too late to join the real world. That shop of yours, it's cute, but it's not a real business. You're what, 32 now? Time to grow up. I dabbed my lips with a napkin, thinking about the documents waiting in my office. Actually, Marcus, I've been meaning to ask you something. Have you ever heard of E. Cross? He froze, fork halfway to his mouth. The collector? Of course. They've been grabbing up properties all over the city. Very mysterious. Some say they're worth billions. Why? Just curious. I heard they've been buying Harrison Global stock. Marcus's face darkened. Where did you hear that? That's confidential information. I stood up, gathering my vintage Hermes bag, another piece my family assumed was a cheap knockoff. Oh, you know how people talk in antique shops. All sorts of interesting things pass through. This is serious business, Emily, he snapped. Not some gossip for your little shop. Tomorrow's board meeting, everything has to go perfectly. I smiled, thinking of the morning to come. I'm sure it will be very interesting. As I walked out of Morton's, I heard Deanna's carrying whisper. I don't know why we still invite her. It's embarrassing having a shopkeeper in the family. In my car, a deliberately modest Volvo that concealed its armored exterior, I called Kate. Is everything ready for tomorrow? Yes, Ms. Harrison. The lawyers have prepared all the documents. The board members have been quietly informed of the change in ownership. And your brother, well, he has no idea what's coming. I drove home to my penthouse apartment, one of many properties I own through various shell companies, and poured myself a glass of champagne. The same vintage Marcus had been drinking, though mine was from a much better year. Tomorrow, everything would change. Tomorrow my brother would learn that his little sister, with her little shop, had outmaneuvered him at every turn. Tomorrow, he'd discover that the mysterious E.H. Cross, the collector whose signature he desperately needed for his Sterling Industries deal, was the same person he'd been mocking over dinner. I walked to my private vault and entered the code. Inside, among other treasures, sat Grandma's last gift to me, a simple silver locket with a note that read, "The true value of things isn't always visible to those who only see the surface." How right she had been. The next morning, I arrived at Harrison Global's headquarters early, not in my usual vintage shop attire, but in a custom-made Valentino suit that cost more than Marcus's car. Kate met me in an underground parking garage, holding a leather portfolio. "The board members are already gathering," she said as we walked to the private elevator. "Your brother is in his office, practicing his presentation. He still thinks this meeting is about his Sterling Industries acquisition." I smiled, thinking of the carefully orchestrated revelations to come. And the documentation. All here, including proof of every Harrison Global share purchased through your various holdings over the past 5 years. The boardroom was impressive, all mahogany and glass with views of the Boston skyline. Board members sat around the massive table, their expressions carefully neutral. They'd been informed of the true ownership situation the night before, sworn to secrecy until this moment. Marcus burst in, his confidence filling the room. "Good morning, everyone. Today's a historic day for Harrison Global." He stopped short when he saw me. "Emily? What are you doing here? This is a private board meeting." "Actually," I said calmly, taking the seat at the head of the table, "I'm exactly where I need to be." He laughed, though I caught the nervous edge in it. "Look, I know your family, but you can't just walk in here. This is a serious business matter." "Oh, I'm quite serious." I nodded to Kate, who began distributing folders to the board members. "Perhaps we should begin with a review of Harrison Global's current ownership structure." Marcus grabbed one of the folders, his face turning pale as he read, This can't be right. Ed Cross owns 51% of our shares. Through a network of shell companies and private holdings." His head snapped up. "How did you get this information?" "The same way I acquired those shares," I said, standing up. "Very carefully, over a very long time." "I don't understand," he stammered. "What do you have to do with E. Cross?" "E. Cross is Emily Harrison Cross," one of the board members explained gently. "Your sister." The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus collapsed into a chair, the folder sliding from his trembling hands. "No, that's impossible. You run an antique shop. You're not. You can't be." The mysterious collector who's been buying up prime real estate across the city, the private investor whose signature you need for the Sterling Industries deal, the majority shareholder of Harrison Global. I smiled. "I'm all of those things, Marcus." "But how? Remember Grandma's inheritance? The one you said I wasted on my little hobby? Turns out knowing the true value of things, whether they're antiques or companies, is quite profitable." The door burst open again as our parents rushed in, clearly summoned by Marcus's desperate texts. "What's going on?" our father demanded. "Marcus says something about Emily and H. Cross. Your daughter," the board chairman announced, "has just been confirmed as the majority shareholder of Harrison Global. All votes involving the Sterling Industries acquisition will require her approval." My mother sank into the nearest chair. "Emily? Our Emily?" I opened my laptop, projecting my company's true holdings onto the wall screen. My little antique shop was just the public face of a much larger operation. While you were all busy mocking my career choice, I built an international investment empire. Harrison Global is just my latest acquisition. Marcus found his voice, anger replacing shock. "You deceived us. All those family dinners, playing the part of the struggling shopkeeper. Like you played the part of the caring brother?" I countered, making jokes about my career, offering to save me from my choices, never once considering that I might be capable of more than you assumed. "We were trying to help you," my father protested. "No, you were trying to force me into a box that fit your expectations. But Grandma saw something different in me. She taught me that true value isn't always obvious in antiques or in people." I turned to Marcus. "The Sterling Industries deal, it's a good acquisition, but your terms are wrong. You're overpaying by about 30%, and the leadership structure you've proposed is unsustainable." He stared at me, years of certainty crumbling. "You've been watching us this whole time. Planning this." I learned patience from my antiques, Some pieces need time to reveal their true worth. I sat back down at the head of the table. Now shall we discuss the real future of Harrison Global? The next few hours were a blur of presentations, negotiations, and restructuring plans. I laid out my vision for the company, one that combined Marcus's market knowledge with my broader investment expertise. By the end, even he had to admit my strategy was sound. As the board members filed out, my parents lingered. My mother's eyes were wet with tears, of shame or pride, I wasn't sure. "Why didn't you tell us?" she asked softly. "Would you have believed me, or would you have tried to take control, just like you did with every other aspect of my life?" My father stepped forward. "We thought we knew what was best for you." "No," I corrected him. "You thought you knew who I was. You never bothered to look deeper." Kate appeared at the door. "Ms. Cross, the Sterling Industries CEO is on the line." Marcus started. "You're taking my deal?" "No," I smiled. "I'm offering you the chance to work with me on a better one. As equals. If you can handle having your little sister as your boss." He laughed, a genuine sound I hadn't heard in years. "I'm starting to think there was never anything little about you, Emily." Over the next few months, Harrison Global transformed. Marcus and I developed a surprising working relationship, his aggressive market strategies balanced by my more measured long-term approach. Our parents had to adjust to a new family dynamic, one where their daughter wasn't just the quirky antique dealer but a powerful business leader. My shop? I kept it open. It remained my sanctuary, a place where I could still hunt for hidden treasures and remember where it all began. Sometimes I'd catch Marcus stopping by during lunch, finally taking the time to really look at the pieces I collected, asking questions about their history and value. One evening, as I was closing up, he arrived with a familiar silver tea set in his hands. "Found this in the attic," he said. "Thought you might want to look at it. Probably just old junk, but..." I smiled, recognizing Grandma's favorite piece. "Actually, brother dear, let me tell you about the true value of things. Because sometimes the most valuable lessons come from learning to look past the surface, to see the worth in what others dismiss. My antique shop had taught me that. And now finally, it had taught my family too." As I locked up that night, I touched Grandma's locket, still hanging around my neck. "You were right," I whispered. "The best revenge isn't just success, it's success on your own terms. And sometimes, if you're patient enough, it comes with the added bonus of teaching those who doubted you the true meaning of value." I stared at the job application on my screen, my finger hovering over the mouse. The name jumped out at me. Michael Bennett, senior finance position. My dear older brother, the golden child who once told me I'd never amount to anything, was now applying to work at my company. He had no idea I owned it. 10 years earlier, I sat at our family's dining room table, clutching my acceptance letter to MIT. I'd earned a partial scholarship to study computer science, but would need help with the remaining tuition. At 18, I thought my parents would be proud. Instead, my father's face turned red with rage. "Computer science?" He spat. "What kind of career is that for someone who can barely pass high school math?" I tried to explain that I'd actually gotten straight A's in math, but he wasn't listening. My mother sat silently while my brother Michael smirked from across the table. "You're not cut out for MIT," Michael said, adjusting his Harvard Business School sweatshirt. "You should be realistic about your limitations." My sister Sophie nodded in agreement. "Seriously, Lily, you're not exactly the brightest bulb. Remember when you couldn't even figure out how to set up your own email?" I did remember. I was 12, and they'd deliberately given me wrong instructions, then laughed when I got frustrated. It was just one of countless jokes at my expense. "I got accepted," I said quietly. "They don't accept people who can't handle the work." My father slammed his hand on the table. "Enough. We're not wasting money sending you to MIT when you'll just drop out. The answer is no." "But my scholarship." I said no. He stood up, towering over me. "If you're so smart, figure out how to pay for it yourself. We're done discussing this." I looked at my mother, hoping for support. She just stirred her tea, avoiding my eyes. That night, I heard them talking in the study. "She's always been the problem child," my father said. "Never as sharp as Michael, never as socially adept as Sophie. Better to cut our losses now." My mother's voice was soft but clear. Maybe she could take some business classes at the community college. Learn to be a secretary or something practical. I packed my bags that night. They found my note the next morning. Don't worry about cutting your losses. I'll figure it out myself. My father's response was to change the locks and freeze my bank account. I had $342 to my name, a laptop I'd saved up for by tutoring kids in math, ironically, and a dream that felt increasingly impossible. But I also had something my family never knew about. I've been coding since I was 14, building websites and small applications for local businesses under a pseudonym. One of my clients was Mrs. Chen, who owned a small tech consulting firm. When I showed up at her office with everything I owned in a backpack, she didn't ask questions. She just gave me a job and let me sleep on the couch in her office for 2 months. Your family is foolish, she said one night, finding me still working at 2 a.m. But their foolishness will be your fuel. Use it. I did. I worked for Mrs. Chen during the day, took online classes at night, and kept building my own projects whenever I could. One of those projects was an algorithm that could predict consumer behavior patterns with unprecedented accuracy. I called it PredictIQ. Mrs. Chen was the first person to see its potential. This could revolutionize how businesses understand their customers, she said, reviewing my code. Have you thought about seeking investors? I hadn't. I was too busy trying to survive. But Mrs. Chen had connections. She arranged meetings, helped me prepare presentations, taught me how to navigate the business world that my family had always claimed I couldn't understand. The first investor meeting was terrifying. 5 men in expensive suits, all looking skeptically at the young woman in second-hand clothes presenting complex algorithms. But when I demonstrated PredictIQ's capabilities, their skepticism turned to interest. How much are you seeking for initial funding? One of them asked. I quoted the number Mrs. Chen and I had calculated, $2 million for 15% equity. They countered with $5 million for 25%. By the end of that meeting, I had more money in promised investment than my family had spent on Michael's entire education. I incorporated my company under a different name, Alexandra Chen, taking Mrs. Chen's surname as a tribute to the woman who believed in me. I didn't want my family finding me through corporate records. The company was called Nova Technologies, and PredictIQ was just the beginning. 3 years later, Nova had grown from a tiny startup to a major player in business intelligence software. We had offices in 3 cities, over 200 employees, an evaluation that made venture capitalists salivate. I kept my identity private, working through proxy executives for public meetings. The media speculated about the mysterious Alexandra Chen, but few people knew who really ran Nova. I preferred it that way. Then came the economic downturn. Companies started laying off workers, including Bennett Financial, where my brother had been working his way up the corporate ladder. I watched from afar as my family's comfortable world began to crumble. Michael lost his job when Bennett Financial downsized. Sophie's luxury real estate business dried up. My father's investment portfolio took massive hits. And now here was Michael's job application on my screen, along with Sophie's from last week, both seeking positions at Nova Technologies, the company their stupid sister had built. The irony would have been delicious if it didn't hurt so much. I clicked through Michael's application. His resume was impressive on paper, Harvard MBA, years of experience, glowing recommendations. But I remembered how he used to belittle me, how he told everyone I was the family disappointment. Sophie's application was similar, full of prestigious institutions and inflated achievements. She was applying for a marketing director position, probably assuming her socialite connections would guarantee her the role. A notification popped up on my screen. My father had just published a LinkedIn post praising Nova Technologies, mentioning that both his highly qualified children were pursuing opportunities with this innovative industry leader. He had no idea he was praising the company built by the daughter he'd thrown away. I sat back in my chair, looking out over the city from my penthouse office. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. On my desk sat the only personal photo I kept at work. Mrs. Chen and me at Nova's first office opening, both of us beaming at the camera. "What would you do?" I asked her photo softly. My intercom buzzed. "Ms. Chen, your 4 o'clock is here. The interview candidate for senior finance." I took a deep breath. Sent him in. It was time for Michael to meet the CEO of Nova Technologies. Time for my brother to look me in the eye and explain why he deserved a place in my company. I straightened my designer blazer, no secondhand clothes anymore, and touched the MIT class ring on my finger. A small reminder of the dream I'd achieved despite them. The door opened and Michael walked in, his confident smile faltering slightly as recognition dawned. "Hello, Michael," I said calmly. "Please have a seat. Let's discuss your qualifications." His face went through a range of emotions: shock, confusion, disbelief, and finally, fear. He knew in that moment that everything was about to change, and I was just getting started. Michael sank into the chair across from my desk, his expensive suit suddenly seeming to shrink around him. The confidence that had carried him through life was evaporating with each passing second. "Lily," he finally managed. This is Alexander Chen," I finished for him. "Yes, that's the name I go by now. Though I'm surprised you didn't recognize it earlier. Mrs. Chen, you remember her? The woman you used to mock for running a tiny, insignificant tech shop?" He swallowed hard. I had no idea. Clearly, I picked up his resume, scanning it with deliberate slowness. Impressive credentials: Harvard MBA, executive positions, leadership roles. "Tell me, did you ever figure out how to properly code an email? Since that was apparently such a crucial skill you thought I lacked." His face flushed at the reminder of his past cruelty. "Listen, Lily, about the past. Ms. Chen," I corrected him. "Let's keep this professional. After all, this is a job interview." The next 30 minutes were the most satisfying of my life. I questioned every point on his resume, challenged every accomplishment, made him explain every career decision. Not out of spite, but because I needed him to understand exactly what he was asking for. "Your last position," I said, "at Bennett Financial. You were laid off." "Downsizing," he mumbled. "The whole sector took a hit." "Interesting, because according to my sources, you were actually laid off for pushing risky investment strategies that cost the company millions. Care to explain that discrepancy?" He shifted uncomfortably. "How did you?" "I'm the CEO of a business intelligence company, Michael. We specialize in knowing things." I closed his file. "Tell me why you want to work at Nova Technologies." "Well, your company's reputation." "No," I cut him off. "The real reason. Why are you here?" He deflated, the last of his pretense crumbling. "I need this job. Dad's investments tanked, Sophie's real estate business is failing, and no one in finance will touch me after Bennett. Nova was my last hope." I let the silence stretch for a moment. "And what makes you think you deserve this opportunity?" He trailed off, genuinely seeming to think about it for the first time. "I don't know." Just then, my intercom buzzed. "Ms. Chen, your sister Sophie has arrived early for her interview." Perfect timing. "Send her in," I said. Sophie strutted in, her designer heels clicking on the hardwood floor. She stopped dead when she saw Michael, then me. "What is this?" she demanded. "Some kind of joke?" "Please, sit down," I gestured to the other chair. We were just discussing family history. The next few minutes were chaos. Sophie tried to maintain her socialite composure, while processing the fact that her useless sister was now her potential boss. Michael sat in stunned silence. I simply waited. "Does Dad know?" Sophie finally asked. "Not yet. Though I imagine he'll find out soon, given how enthusiastically he's been promoting Nova Technologies on LinkedIn." My phone buzzed. A text from Mrs. Chen. "Your father just arrived in the lobby. Says he's here to personally recommend his children." I smiled. "In fact, why don't we make this a full family reunion? Send him up," I told my assistant. When my father walked in, his confident stride faltered. He looked from Michael to Sophie to me, his face going through the same emotions theirs had. "Hello, Dad," I said calmly. "We were just discussing job opportunities at my company. Please join us." He stood there, frozen, looking like he'd seen a ghost. In a way, he had. The ghost of the daughter he'd dismissed and discarded. "You," he started, then stopped. "Yes, me. The daughter you kicked out for daring to dream of MIT. The one you call useless." I stood up, my height now matching his. "The one who built a billion-dollar company while you were busy praising Michael's mediocre achievements and Sophie's hollow successes." "Lily, we didn't," Sophie began. "Ms. Chen," I corrected again. "And yes, you did. All of you. You spent years convincing yourselves I was worthless because I didn't fit your narrow definition of success. Well, now look where we are. I pressed a button on my desk, and the wall screen came to life, displaying Nova's latest financial reports, client lists, and market valuation. This is what your useless daughter built, without your money, without your connections, without your support. In fact, your only contribution was showing me exactly what kind of person I didn't want to be. My father found his voice. We were wrong. Obviously, but we're still family. Family? I laughed. Family doesn't throw their daughter out at 18. Family doesn't mock and belittle and dismiss. The only family I've had for the past 10 years is Mrs. Chen, who believed in me when you couldn't be bothered to try. I picked up their applications. You want jobs? Fine, here's what's going to happen. You'll start at entry-level positions, no special treatment, no executive roles. You'll work your way up based on actual merit, not family connections. And if you ever mention our relationship to anyone in this company, you're done. Those are my terms. Entry-level? Sophie looked horrified. But my experience is irrelevant. I cut her off. This is a technology company, Sophie. We need people who understand innovation, not social climbing. You want to work here. Prove you can learn, grow, and contribute without riding on someone else's coattails. Michael nodded slowly. That's fair. More than fair, actually. My father stood straighter. Lily, Ms. Chen, I know we can't undo the past, but please give us a chance, though. To what? Make amends? Rebuild bridges? This isn't about reconciliation, Dad. This is business. Pure and simple. I sat back down, every inch the CDO. You have until tomorrow morning to decide. The jobs are available under those terms, no negotiation. Now, I believe we're done here. They filed out silently, looking shell-shocked. As the door closed behind them, I let out a long breath. Mrs. Chen appeared in the doorway. You did well, she said softly. Did I? I asked. Part of me wanted to reject them outright. She smiled. That's why you didn't. Revenge is easy. Teaching them to be better, that's the real challenge. 6 months later, I stood on stage at our annual company meeting, announcing Nova's expansion into international markets. In the audience, I could see Michael in his entry-level analyst position, taking notes and actually paying attention. Sophie was in customer service, learning for the first time in her life what it meant to work without privilege to fall back on. They were different people now. Humbler, harder working, still not family. That bridge had burned too thoroughly, but maybe, eventually, they could become something else. Employees I could respect. My father had declined the job offer. His pride wouldn't let him work under his daughter's authority. Instead, he sent a long email apologizing for the past and asking to meet for coffee sometime. I haven't replied yet. Maybe someday I will. For now, I focus on running my company, mentoring young entrepreneurs who remind me of myself at 18. And having weekly dinners with Mrs. Chen, who still tells me I'm too soft on them sometimes. They're lucky you gave them any chance at all, she said during our last dinner. Maybe, but as I watched them learn and struggle and slowly earn their places at Nova, I realized something. Success isn't just about proving others wrong. Sometimes it's about giving them the chance to prove themselves wrong. Michael and Sophie will never be executives at Nova. They'll never have the power they once took for granted. But they might finally learn the lesson I had to learn alone. True worth isn't inherited or given. It's earned one day at a time through hard work and humility. As for me, I kept the name Alexandra Chen, not to hide anymore, but because it reminds me of who believed in me when no one else would. My MIT ring still sits on my finger, and my useless computer science degree hangs in my office alongside Nova's many awards. Sometimes the best revenge isn't destroying your enemies. It's becoming so successful that they have to come to you for help, and then teaching them the lessons they should have learned long ago. The useless daughter they threw away now signs their paychecks, and every time they cash those checks, they're reminded of exactly how wrong they were. That's worth more than revenge could ever be.